Case 1. Peter Popoff. The auditorium fell silent as Peter Popoff closed his eyes and placed his hand to his forehead. Thousands of desperate believers leaned forward in their seats, watching the silver-held preacher's face contort with divine concentration. Cancer patients, wheelchair-bound invalids, and families facing financial ruin all held their breath, waiting for God to speak through this man who claimed direct communication with heaven. "The Lord is showing me someone here tonight," Popoff announced, his voice trembling with apparent spiritual intensity. "There's a woman in Section B. Your name is Margaret Williams from Detroit. You've been suffering with diabetes for 12 years, and you've been praying for healing." In the crowd, Margaret Williams gasped and shot to her feet, tears streaming down her face. How could this stranger possibly know her name, her city, her exact medical condition? She had never met Peter Popoff before tonight. This had to be a miracle, direct revelation from God himself. "Come forward, Margaret," Popoff commanded, his voice booming through the arena. "The Lord wants to heal you tonight. Your faith has moved the heart of God, and he's ready to restore your body completely." As Margaret made her way to the stage, trembling with anticipation, Popoff continued receiving divine messages. He called out specific names, addresses, and intimate medical details about dozens of audience members. Each revelation seemed more impossible than the last. The crowd erupted in worship, convinced they were witnessing supernatural power in action. But on a cold night in 1986, investigator James Randi was sitting in that same audience with a very different kind of equipment. While everyone else was focused on Popoff's miraculous revelations, Randi was listening to radio frequencies. What he discovered would shatter the faith of millions and expose one of the most elaborate religious frauds in American history. Through his radio scanner, Randi heard a woman's voice transmitting detailed information about audience members directly to someone on stage. "Hello, Petey, can you hear me?" the voice whispered through the static. "I'm looking at prayer cards right now. We have Margaret Williams, diabetes, Section B, seat 14. She wrote that she's been suffering for 12 years. The voice belonged to Elizabeth Popoff, Peter's wife, who was backstage reading prayer cards that audience members had filled out before the service. She was feeding her husband private information through a tiny wireless receiver hidden in his ear, information that he was presenting as divine revelation from God himself. Margaret Williams hadn't witnessed a miracle that night. She had been the victim of a carefully orchestrated deception that had turned her deepest spiritual hopes into a weapon against her own faith and wallet. But Popoff was just the beginning of a web of religious fraud that spans decades and has stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the most vulnerable believers on Earth. Welcome to Savage Case Files, where we expose the darkest secrets hidden behind facades of trust and authority. Hit that subscribe button now, because true crime cases like these are exactly what Savage Case Files is all about. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Case 2, Jim Bakker. Jim Bakker had built the most successful Christian television network in America by 1987. His PTL Club reached millions of viewers daily, and his Heritage USA theme park in South Carolina was the third most visited attraction in the country, drawing more tourists than Disneyland. Bakker and his flamboyant wife, Tammy Faye, had become household names, symbols of Christian prosperity and family values. But behind the cameras and beyond the carefully constructed image of godly success, Bakker was operating one of the largest mail and wire fraud schemes in religious history. He was selling lifetime partnerships to Heritage USA that promised luxurious vacation accommodations for a one-time donation of $1,000. The problem was mathematical impossibility. Bakker sold over 150,000 partnerships for facilities that could only accommodate 25,000 guests. The scheme unraveled in 1987 when Bakker's sexual encounter with church secretary Jessica Hahn became public, followed immediately by revelations about his fraudulent fundraising practices. Federal investigators discovered that Bakker had raised over $158 million from faithful supporters while using the money to fund his lavish lifestyle, pay hush money to Jessica Hahn, and maintain the illusion of a thriving ministry. In 1989, Bakker was convicted on 24 counts of mail and wire fraud and sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. The man who had preached prosperity to millions lost everything: his empire, his family, and his freedom. Case 3. Robert Tilton. Robert Tilton's Success and Life television program was a prayer factory that generated over $80 million annually at its peak. Tilton promised viewers that he would personally pray over every request they mailed to his Texas headquarters, but only if those prayers came with substantial financial donations. Desperate families sent their life savings, along with handwritten pleas for healing, financial breakthrough, and divine intervention. In 1991, investigative reporters from WFAA-TV in Dallas made a shocking discovery that would destroy Tilton's empire overnight. They followed garbage trucks from Tilton's ministry headquarters to a dump in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they found thousands of unopened prayer requests that had been thrown away like trash. Elderly widows had sent their Social Security checks, cancer patients had mailed their treatment money, and unemployed workers had donated their last dollars, all believing Tilton would personally intercede with God on their behalf. The footage showed bags full of heartbreaking prayer letters, mixed with office garbage and rotting food. While Tilton had carefully extracted and deposited every donation, the actual prayers, the desperate pleas for help that had motivated people to give, were discarded without being read. The man who claimed to spend hours praying over each request had never even opened the letters. The exposé triggered a congressional investigation and destroyed Tilton's credibility completely. His television program was dropped by most stations, donations plummeted, and he eventually relocated overseas to continue his fraudulent operations away from American media scrutiny. Case 4. Oral Roberts. By 1987, Oral Roberts had spent 4 decades building one of the most respected healing ministries in America, but financial pressures were mounting on his Oral Roberts University, and the medical school he had founded was facing closure. Rather than quietly scaling back operations, Roberts made a decision that would forever change how Americans viewed televangelism. During a January 1987 television broadcast, the 69-year-old Roberts looked directly into the camera and delivered what amounted to a divine ransom demand. He claimed that during a prayer session, Jesus Christ had appeared to him, 900 feet tall, and delivered an ultimatum: raise $8 million for the medical school by March 1987, or God would call him home. "I don't want to die," Roberts pleaded during subsequent broadcasts. "I have so much more work to do for God. But the Lord has spoken, and His word is final. Unless His people respond with the faith offering He has requested, He will take me home to heaven." The psychological manipulation was extraordinary. Roberts wasn't just asking for money, he was holding his own life hostage and making his followers responsible for his survival. Elderly supporters sent their Social Security checks, families emptied savings accounts, and churches took special collections to save their beloved pastor from divine execution. The deadline drama reached its climax when dog track owner Jerry Collins donated the final $1.3 million needed to meet God's supposed demand. But the victory was short-lived. The medical school closed permanently in 1989, proving that Roberts' life-or-death fundraising campaign had failed to address the underlying problems that made the institution unsustainable. Case 5. Kenneth Copeland. Kenneth Copeland has transformed the prosperity gospel into the most financially successful religious empire in modern American history. For over 5 decades, his ministry has generated more than $760 million in donations, while Copeland himself has accumulated a personal fortune estimated at over $300 million, making him one of the wealthiest religious figures in the world. Copeland's operation represents the ultimate evolution of televangelism fraud, a sophisticated financial machine that operates from a 1,500-acre compound in Texas, resembling a luxury resort more than a religious facility. The cornerstone of his empire is a private aviation fleet, including multiple jets worth tens of millions of dollars. His crown jewel is a $36 million Gulfstream V that he claims is necessary for spreading the gospel worldwide. When questioned about the extravagant aircraft, Copeland famously defended the purchase by claiming commercial airlines were filled with demons that would interfere with his spiritual work. "I can't be on a long tube with a bunch of demons," he explained during a television interview. "It gets deadly in there." But the most disturbing aspect of Copeland's operation is his hundredfold return promise. The claim that every dollar donated will return as $100 in divine blessings. This mathematical impossibility has convinced millions of followers to send money they can't afford, believing they are purchasing guaranteed financial miracles. Former ministry employees describe an organization obsessed with fundraising quotas, using sophisticated marketing techniques to extract maximum revenue from each contributor while the majority of donors earn less than $50,000 annually. Case 6. Creflo Dollar. In 2015, Creflo Dollar launched one of the most audacious fundraising campaigns in televangelism history. The prosperity gospel preacher asked 200,000 of his followers to donate $300 each to purchase a $65 million Gulfstream G650 aircraft, one of the most luxurious private jets available. Dollar framed the jet purchase as a divine necessity for his ministry's global outreach. "We need this plane to take the gospel around the world," he explained to his followers. "When you give toward this project, you're not buying me a plane. You're investing in souls being saved in nations that need to hear the prosperity message." The campaign sparked national outrage and brought unprecedented scrutiny to Dollar's ministry. Investigative analysis revealed that his World Changers Church International was essentially a family business disguised as a religious nonprofit, with Dollar's wife, children, and close associates holding highly paid positions that enriched his entire family with donated funds. The Jet campaign revealed the devastating mathematics of prosperity gospel giving. Working-class families were being asked to fund luxury purchases that few millionaires could afford. Financial records showed that very little donated money actually went toward charitable work, with the vast majority supporting Dollar's luxury lifestyle and payments to family members. The campaign created what critics called a reverse Robin Hood effect, systematically transferring wealth from poor believers to enrich those who were already extremely wealthy. Case 7. Mike Murdoch. Mike Murdoch took prosperity gospel bragging to shocking new levels when he publicly boasted about purchasing 2 private jets with cash donations from his followers. The televangelist's arrogant displays of wealth revealed the true nature of his ministry's priorities: personal enrichment disguised as religious service. Murdoch's fundraising tactics specifically targeted vulnerable populations with promises of financial breakthroughs. He would tell viewers that sending money to his ministry was equivalent to planting seeds that God would multiply into massive financial harvests. Elderly viewers on fixed incomes and families facing financial hardship were encouraged to send their last dollars to fund what Murdoch claimed were divine investment opportunities. Investigation into Murdoch's ministry finances revealed that a minimal portion of donations actually went to legitimate charitable causes. Instead, the vast majority of funds supported his increasingly lavish lifestyle and personal aircraft collection. Former staff members described a ministry obsessed with donation tracking and donor manipulation, using sophisticated psychological pressure tactics to maximize revenue extraction. The cash jet purchases became symbols of everything wrong with prosperity gospel ministry. Wealthy preachers using religious authority to convince poor followers that funding luxury purchases would somehow result in their own financial breakthrough. Murdoch's brazen displays of donor-funded wealth demonstrated how completely the prosperity gospel had inverted traditional Christian values, turning sacrificial giving into a pathway for personal enrichment rather than charitable service. Case 8. J. Charles Jessup. J. Charles Jessup built his reputation as a miracle-working revival preacher who could allegedly heal the sick and transform lives through divine intervention. His tent meetings across the American South drew thousands of desperate believers seeking supernatural solutions to their most serious problems. But federal investigators discovered that Jessup's entire ministry was built on fabricated testimonials and fraudulent healing claims designed to extract maximum donations from vulnerable audiences. Jessup's operation involved carefully orchestrated performances where planted audience members would claim miraculous healings during his services. These fake testimonials were then used in mass mailings to solicit donations from people who believed they were supporting a legitimate healing ministry. In 1982, federal prosecutors convicted Jessup on multiple counts of mail fraud, proving that his revival meetings were elaborate theatrical productions designed to deceive believers into sending money for non-existent miracles. Case 9. Jim Whittington. Jim Whittington's downfall came in 1992 when federal prosecutors convicted him on 11 counts, including conspiracy, mail fraud, and money laundering tied to his ministry's fundraising operations. Whittington had created a complex financial scheme that used his religious organization as a front for laundering money and defrauding donors who believed they were supporting legitimate charitable work. The investigation revealed that Whittington had diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations away from their stated charitable purposes and into personal accounts and questionable business ventures. His ministry's fundraising letters promised that donations would support missionary work and help needy families, but the money was instead channeled through a network of shell companies and fake charities that existed only to enrich Whittington and his associates. Case 10. Leroy Jenkins. The Leroy Jenkins turned faith healing into a public health hazard when investigators discovered that the miracle water he was selling to desperate believers was contaminated with dangerous bacteria and chemicals. Jenkins claimed his specially blessed water could cure cancer, diabetes, and other serious illnesses, convincing thousands of sick people to purchase bottles for substantial donations. Health authorities who tested Jenkins' miracle water found multiple contaminants that could actually worsen medical conditions or cause new health problems. The man who promised divine healing was literally poisoning the people who trusted him most. Cancer patients had stopped legitimate medical treatments to rely on Jenkins' contaminated water, while families had spent their life savings purchasing what they believed were miracle cures. The exposure of Jenkins' contaminated water triggered regulatory investigations and criminal charges. Health departments issued warnings about the dangerous products, and law enforcement agencies began investigating Jenkins for fraud and endangering public health. The scandal revealed how faith healing could become a deadly scam when desperate people were convinced to abandon proven medical treatments in favor of fraudulent alternatives. Case 11. T.B. Joshua. Nigerian televangelist T.B. Joshua built an international following through his dramatic televised healing services that appeared to show miraculous cures and supernatural interventions. His Emmanuel TV broadcasts reached millions of viewers worldwide, many of whom traveled to Nigeria and sent donations believing they could receive similar miracles. But a comprehensive BBC investigation revealed that Joshua's most dramatic healings were carefully staged theatrical performances using paid actors and special effects. The investigation documented how Joshua's staff recruited people to play specific roles during filming, coaching them on exactly what medical conditions to claim and how to react during the supposed healing moments. The BBC's undercover footage showed Joshua's team rehearsing miracle scenarios, preparing fake medical equipment, and instructing participants on how to make their performances appear authentic. The investigation revealed that many of Joshua's most famous healing testimonials were complete fabrications designed to drive church growth and increase international donations from viewers who believed they were witnessing genuine supernatural power. Case 12. Emmanuel Makandiwa. Zimbabwean preacher Emmanuel Makandiwa gained international attention for his claims of performing instant miracles, including dramatic weight loss and money materialization during live church services. Videos of these supposed supernatural events went viral on social media, attracting thousands of new followers and substantial donations from people convinced they were witnessing divine power. However, investigations revealed that Makandiwa's instant miracles were elaborate illusions created through careful staging and audience manipulation. His weight loss miracles involved before and after participants who were actually different people, while his money materialization tricks used basic sleight-of-hand techniques and planted currency. Former church members came forward to expose how Makandiwa's staff carefully selected and coached participants to create the illusion of supernatural transformation. Case 13. Walter Magaya. Walter Magaya's ministry in Zimbabwe gained notoriety for his claims that he could cure HIV, cancer, and other terminal illnesses through divine healing sessions. Desperate patients traveled from across Africa seeking Magaya's supernatural intervention, often abandoning proven medical treatments in favor of his promised miracle cures. Health authorities flagged Magaya's healing sessions after discovering that seriously ill patients were being told to stop taking life-saving medications in favor of prayer and faith healing. Medical professionals documented cases where HIV patients had stopped antiretroviral therapy after Magaya claimed to have cured them, leading to dangerous health complications and disease progression. The investigation revealed that Magaya was profiting substantially from his healing sessions through donations and fees from desperate patients and their families. His false medical claims were not only fraudulent, but potentially deadly, as vulnerable people were being convinced to abandon proven treatments that could save their lives. Case 14. Obert Angel. Obert Angel built an international ministry empire spanning Zimbabwe and the United Kingdom by claiming he could literally materialize money through divine power. His miracle money demonstrations showed Angel apparently creating cash from thin air during church services, convincing thousands of followers that God was supernaturally multiplying currency for faithful believers. Angel's elaborate performances involved sophisticated sleight-of-hand techniques and planted audience members who would discover money that had supposedly materialized in their pockets or purses during his services. These demonstrations were filmed and broadcast internationally, attracting donors who believed they could receive similar financial miracles by supporting Angel's ministry. Investigation revealed that Angel was channeling donations into funding his lavish personal lifestyle, including luxury homes, expensive cars, and international travel. His ministry operated as a sophisticated financial scheme that promised supernatural wealth multiplication while systematically transferring money from poor believers to enrich Angel and his inner circle. Former staff members exposed how the miracle money events were carefully choreographed illusions designed to manipulate vulnerable people into sending substantial donations. The scheme spanned multiple countries, with Angel using his UK operations to legitimize his Zimbabwe-based activities while avoiding regulatory oversight in both jurisdictions. His international network allowed him to exploit legal loopholes and transfer funds between countries to avoid accountability for his fraudulent practices. Case 15. Lazarus Moka. Nigerian pastor Lazarus Muoka's Lord's Chosen ministry gained widespread attention for spectacular healing services that appeared to show instant cures and supernatural transformations. His dramatic church services were recorded and distributed internationally, attracting followers who believed they were witnessing genuine divine power. But former ministry members revealed that Muoka's most impressive miracles were carefully rehearsed performances involving paid participants and elaborate staging. Ex-congregation members described how Muoka's staff would recruit people to play specific roles during services, coaching them on exactly what medical conditions to claim and how to react during supposed healing moments. The testimonials that made Muoka famous were scripted performances designed to drive massive donation campaigns from believers who expected similar supernatural outcomes. Former insiders exposed how the ministry maintained detailed scripts for different types of miracles, with participants practicing their roles repeatedly before performing during filmed services. Muoka's operation generated substantial revenue through donations from viewers who believed they were supporting a legitimate healing ministry. The money flowed directly into funding Muoka's personal lifestyle and expanding his media operations, while the people who needed genuine help received nothing but false hope and empty promises. Case 16. J. Israel. South African pastor J. Israel Sr. became one of the few religious fraudsters to publicly confess after being exposed for orchestrating fake miracle events using paid actors. His admission came after investigative journalists documented his use of hired performers to stage healing demonstrations and supernatural manifestations during church services. Israel's confession revealed the sophisticated planning required to create believable miracle performances. He described how his team would recruit actors, provide them with detailed scripts about medical conditions and family backgrounds, and rehearse their performances to ensure maximum emotional impact on genuine audience members. The exposure showed how Israel had solicited substantial donations by claiming that the staged miracles demonstrated God's power working through his ministry. Believers who witnessed the fake healings were convinced they were seeing divine intervention and responded with generous financial support that funded Israel's personal enrichment. Israel's confession provided rare insider insight into the mechanics of miracle fraud, revealing how easily desperate people could be deceived by carefully planned theatrical performances disguised as supernatural events. His admission helped expose similar tactics being used by other religious fraudsters operating across South Africa and internationally. Page 17. Shepherd Bushiri. Malawian preacher Shepherd Bushiri operated one of the most sophisticated international religious fraud schemes before becoming a fugitive, facing multiple charges of fraud and money laundering. His enlightened Christian gathering ministry claimed supernatural abilities, including prophecy, healing, and wealth creation, that attracted followers across Africa and beyond. Bushiri's operation involved massive donation campaigns, funded by followers who believed his prophecies and miracle claims were genuine divine revelations. He promised followers that supporting his ministry would result in their own financial breakthroughs and supernatural blessings, generating millions of dollars in donations from people across multiple countries. The scheme unraveled when South African authorities began investigating Bushiri's financial activities and discovered evidence of money laundering and investment fraud. Prosecutors found that Bushiri had been using ministry funds for personal enrichment while operating illegal investment schemes that defrauded followers of substantial amounts. Bushiri eventually fled South Africa to avoid prosecution, but he had already admitted that financial motives drove his ministry activities. His fugitive status and the criminal charges against him revealed the true nature of his supernatural claims. They were sophisticated tools for extracting money from believers rather than genuine religious experiences. Case 18. Kirby John Caldwell. Prominent Houston pastor Kirby John Caldwell, who had officiated weddings for President George W. Bush's family, shocked the religious community when he pleaded guilty to participating in a $3.5 million bond fraud scheme that specifically targeted elderly donors in his congregation. Caldwell had used his position as a respected senior pastor to convince elderly church members to invest their life savings in what he claimed were legitimate government bonds. Instead, the bonds were worthless certificates that existed only to defraud vulnerable investors who trusted their pastor's financial advice. The scheme revealed how religious authority could be weaponized to overcome natural skepticism about investment opportunities. Elderly congregation members who would normally be cautious about financial schemes trusted Caldwell because of his pastoral position and his high-profile connections to political leaders. Federal prosecutors demonstrated that Caldwell had deliberately targeted the most vulnerable members of his congregation, elderly people with substantial savings who trusted their pastor implicitly. The wire fraud conviction resulted in a 6-year prison sentence and exposed how even highly respected religious leaders could exploit their congregations for personal financial gain. Case 19, Israel Ogundipe. Nigerian televangelist Israel Ogundipe was sentenced to prison after being convicted of unlawfully conversion of about $30,000 that a church member had entrusted to him for ministry purposes. The case revealed how religious leaders could exploit personal relationships with followers to gain access to their financial resources. Ogundipe had convinced a female congregation member to give him substantial funds that were supposedly intended for legitimate ministry activities. Instead of using the money for its stated purpose, he converted the funds for his personal use while leaving the donor financially devastated. The conviction demonstrated that even relatively smaller-scale religious fraud could have devastating consequences for individual victims. The woman who had trusted Ogundipe with her money lost her life savings while he used the funds to support his personal lifestyle and ministry operations. Ogundipe's case highlighted the vulnerability of devoted religious followers who could be convinced to trust their spiritual leaders with substantial financial resources. His criminal conviction and imprisonment showed that religious authority provided no protection from prosecution when fraud was clearly documented. Case 20, Benny Hinn. The Healing Showman. Benny Hinn became one of the most recognizable faces in televangelism through his dramatic miracle crusades that filled stadiums worldwide with people seeking supernatural healing. His theatrical healing services, featuring dramatic falls and apparent instant cures, generated hundreds of millions of dollars in donations from desperate believers, convinced they were witnessing divine power. But investigative journalists and former ministry employees revealed that Hinn's most spectacular healings were carefully orchestrated performances. His staff would pre-screen audience members, selecting those with conditions that could appear dramatically improved through adrenaline and suggestion, while avoiding genuinely verifiable medical conditions that would expose the fraud. The most damaging revelations came from hidden camera investigations showing Hinn's luxury lifestyle funded by donations from poverty-stricken followers. While preaching about miraculous financial breakthrough for supporters, Hinn was purchasing multi-million-dollar homes, staying in $3,000 per night hotel suites, and traveling exclusively on private jets, all funded by donations from people who could barely afford basic necessities. Medical follow-up studies of Hinn's claimed healings consistently found no evidence of genuine supernatural cures. Patients who appeared healed during his services often experienced return of symptoms within days, while others had never actually suffered from the conditions Hinn claimed to cure. The investigations revealed that his healing ministry was essentially an elaborate theatrical production designed to generate maximum emotional impact and donation revenue. If you're fascinated by true crime that goes beyond simple murder mysteries and explores the systematic destruction of human trust, then Savage Case Files is exactly what you've been looking for. We don't just tell you what happened, we show you how these predators operate, why their victims trusted them, and how similar schemes are still running today. Subscribe to Savage Case Files, where we expose the truth behind society's most devastating betrayals.